Good mythical afternoon. This is Mr. Ayala with another video for you. This is 10.3 Jackson, States' Rights, and Nullification Theory. As always, if you need this information, it may be helpful to write it down. You may also want to review this if you may misclassed or if you just need a little bit of extra help, because these are two topics that are not the easiest things to wrap our heads around. So without further ado, let's get started. So your objectives. You'll be able to analyze how sectional conflict begin to increase during this time period. So in the prior chapters we looked at the differences between the North, the South, and the West, and now we're going to talk about how that's going to begin to escalate. You will be able to explain the Calhoun's ideas behind states' rights and nullification theory and some of the issues that Jackson had with his vice president, and you'll be able to identify the differences shown during Senator Webster and Senator Haynes' debate. So to start off with, let's look at some sectional differences. So we do know that as soon as Jackson took office, differences across the United States began to change and begin to become larger conflicts. The Northeast, the West, and the South all began to look at things a little bit differently. So some of the major economic issues, the sales of public land. So for the West, they really want cheap land, but the Northeast didn't like this idea because if the West had cheap land, people will not stay in the Northeast, and they needed factory workers. The Northeast and West, though, both agreed on the idea of needing roads and canals to be able to increase their ability to trade. But the South dislikes this idea because the only way to pay for all of these is by using tariffs, and because the South only exported cotton and had to import most of their goods, this made their prices more expensive. So we had multiple conflicts and agreements going around. So with tariffs, we know that the Northeast wants them to protect their manufacturers, while the South imported most of this goods, so they disliked this idea. So makes perfect sense. If you make those goods, you want high tariffs so that goods coming from outside of the country are more expensive comparatively to yours, so you can grow your own industry and increase your profit. While if you are a consumer of those goods, like the South, you're going to thoroughly dislike that. So we get back to the Tariff Abomination. So as John Quincy Adams leaves office, he has Congress pass an extremely high tariff, which the South and Jackson's supporters will begin to call this the Tariff of Abominations. So we have a major issue. We have an extremely high tariff, which is going to really take off the South, especially since South Carolina's economy is in a major slump at this time. And South Carolina has this kind of a odd tradition or quirk that anytime something comes back, it goes bad in the United States or something they don't really agree with, they always threaten to secede. They're like, oh no, I don't like this, I'm going to leave the Union. But so this is the first time that South Carolina really does this. So South Carolina threatens to succeed, and it's mostly because of the vice president of the United States, Andrew Jackson's vice president at this time, John C. Calhoun, supported the ideas of states' rights and the doctrine of nullification. And so he supported the idea that the United States is not made out of sovereign citizens, but out of sovereign states. And without the states, the United States itself would not exist. So if a state is the citizen, is the one that the liberty is built on, that the doctrine of nullification can come in effect, which is that you can nullify or reject a federal law you dislike. So that means if a state dislikes a law that the United States government puts onto the books, they can remove that law. But this is extremely illegal because in the Constitution, the national government has what we call the National Supremacy Clause, which is that all United States laws passed through Congress through the national government, supersede the rights of a state. So when they passed this tariff, John C. Calhoun was like, no, we can nullify this law. And Jackson's going to be like, have you read the Constitution? It's called the idea of supremacy, the National Supremacy Law. So we have these major debates going in through the whole country. So we have the whole idea that one part wants a strong federal and national government, which is supported by Andrew Jackson because, well, he's the president. And the second one is John C. Calhoun's ideas, which is view of a state's rights and their ability to nullify a law. And because of this, we get two major senators, Webster and Haynes, debating. So Haynes, a senator from South Carolina, defends states' rights. He says that the ability for a state to nullify a law protects their freedom and their ability to protest a law from the United States lawfully. So more or less, if the national government makes a law that state dislikes or extremely disagrees, that state can nullify that law, and then they can protest that law peacefully without having to threaten to secede, which South Carolina did at this point. While Webster, he said it's not the states that make up the union, but the people themselves that live in those states. So the freedom is reserved for those people as citizens, not the state itself. So when a state nullifies or get rid of a law, it is saying to the people, you don't count, because even though you control the national government, you don't count because I'm the state and I choose differently. So Jackson supports the idea of the union, but not the idea of nullification, and Vice President Calhoun had the complete opposite. So Calhoun and Jackson's Vice President Calhoun and Andrew Jackson will have a major conflict. So bad that Calhoun will actually flee the White House and resign as vice president. So because South Carolina threatens to secede, and because of this idea of the Tariff Abomination, South Carolina's like, I hate you still, United States government, I'm leaving. And Jackson, of course, is enraged because, he doesn't take things very lightly. So he states, I will hang the first man I see from the rafters. More or less saying that the first man he sees from South Carolina, aka his vice president at this time, is going to be hanging from the White House. Yeah, that's very much Jackson, kind of on the crazy side there. So Jackson actually ends up still winning the election of 1832, even without John C. Calhoun's support and him as vice president, because he was just that popular. And because Henry Clay wants to avert civil war, wants to avert Jackson invading South Carolina, because if Jackson threatens something, he's going to do it. So he gets Congress to reduce the tariff and calms tensions. So that would be the end of today's video. And as always, don't forget to be awesome.